On the morning of September 11th, 2001, nearly everyone remembers the planes, the fireballs and the collapse. What fewer people talk about are the stairwells. Narrow, dark, smoke-filled concrete corridors where thousands of people made split-second decisions with incomplete information. These stairwells became the last lifeline for survivors trapped above impact zones, and in some cases the only reason anyone escaped at all. If you want to understand survival under extreme conditions, this is where the real story lives. The people who walked out of the World Trade Center did not survive by luck alone. They survived because of awareness, movement, discipline, and decisions made minute by minute under pressure. Why the stairwells mattered more than elevators or windows. Once the planes hit, elevators became death traps almost instantly. Power failures, severed cables, and fire turned them useless or lethal. Windows were not exits. That left stairwells as the only viable escape route. The Twin Towers were built with 3 stairwells per tower, reinforced by thick concrete. Most people assumed all were destroyed. That assumption killed many. Survivors lived because at least one stairwell in each tower remained passable, even after catastrophic damage. Those who searched, listened, and moved deliberately found pathways others never believed existed. How survivors avoided the fatal mistake of waiting for instructions. One of the most important lessons from stairwell survivors is that they did not wait. Many occupants above the impact zones were initially told to remain at their desks. Survivors who ignored that guidance and began moving immediately gained precious minutes. These minutes meant lower temperatures, clearer air, and less congestion. In practical terms, this reinforces a survival principle used in aviation and maritime emergencies today. If conditions are deteriorating and the threat is obvious, passive obedience can be fatal. How stairwell discipline prevented panic from turning deadly. Inside the stairwells, survivors describe an almost unnatural calm. People move single file. They stayed to the right. They spoke quietly to conserve oxygen. This was not accidental. Fire wardens and employees with emergency training enforced order without shouting. Survivors who followed structure survived longer and moved faster than crowds who rushed. In real-world survival terms, this mirrors evacuation science used in submarines, mines, and high-rise fires today. Controlled movement saves lives. Practicing calm exits in buildings you frequent is not paranoia. It is preparation. You know, physical endurance really mattered more than speed. Many of the survivors, well, they weren't athletes. Some were injured, overweight, or even elderly. What separated them wasn't speed, but persistence. For some, descending dozens of floors actually took over an hour. Survivors stopped when necessary, leaned against the walls, and took the time to control their breathing. Those who sprinted early, they often collapsed later on. It's a brutally practical takeaway, honestly. Endurance beats bursts of effort in long-duration emergencies. Whether you're evacuating a skyscraper or hiking out of remote terrain, pacing yourself is what keeps you alive. Survivors, even under extreme stress, instinctively adopted this strategy. Communication inside the stairwells, well, it truly saved lives. Survivors were constantly sharing information with each other. Someone would shout that smoke was heavier below, and others warned about broken steps or debris along the way. Firefighters moving upward provided both reassurance and direction. This ongoing exchange created what you might call a living intelligence network. In survival situations, information really does multiply survivability. These days, modern emergency response teams are trained to relay conditions verbally when electronic communication fails. Even now, disaster response models actually study the communication that happened in the stairwells on 9/11 just to improve civilian evacuation behavior. Firefighters and civilians, they survive together for a reason. Some of the most remarkable survivals involved firefighters escorting civilians downward, all while moving toward the fire themselves. In Stairwell B of the North Tower, a group survived the collapse because the stairwell remained intact and because firefighters directed people away from weaker areas. This really highlights another survival truth. Professionals don't eliminate risk, but they help manage it. In everyday life, recognizing and following competent leadership during emergencies can absolutely mean the difference between chaos and survival. Now, let's talk about how awareness of building layout influenced survival. Survivors who knew the building, well, they definitely had an advantage. They understood where stairwells connected, where doors might be locked, and which routes were longer but safer. This kind of knowledge applies directly to, modern preparedness. Knowing exits, alternative routes, and the structural layouts of workplaces, malls and hotels isn't excessive. It's, just practical. Survivors of 9/11 didn't memorize blueprints. They simply paid attention over time. And that awareness, in the end, became life-saving knowledge when it mattered most. Why did some people survive the collapse itself? Well, a small number of survivors were still in stairwells when the towers fell. Their survival, you see, was due to structural shielding, positioning, and frankly, sheer physics. Being against interior walls, below major impact points, and away from open shafts reduced the fatal force. This, I think, reinforces a difficult but important reality. When escape is no longer possible, positioning can still influence survival. Modern disaster guidance now includes shelter-in-place positioning strategies derived from these rare survivals. So, what do the stairwell survivors teach us today? The stairwell survivors of 9/11 were not heroes in the cinematic sense. They were really ordinary people who moved early, stayed disciplined, shared information, paced themselves, and refused to surrender control of their decisions. Their actions now shape evacuation design, emergency training, and survival doctrine worldwide. Applying these lessons today means taking exits seriously, rehearsing movement under stress, respecting structure, and understanding that survival often depends on quiet, unglamorous choices made under pressure. Applying these lessons today means taking exits seriously, rehearsing movement under stress, respecting structure, and understanding that survival often depends on quiet, unglamorous choices made under pressure.